my students into reading more about current affairs and about contemporary history. History is very important. And also to be more knowledgeable about a broad range of subjects, like reading book reviews all the time. Not necessarily books. Books, there are too many ways to read. Reviews, yes. At least knowing the titles. Philosophers' names are often dropped by people who like to drop names. If you haven't heard of that philosopher's name, you can't even repeat like some of those Greek philosophers. Proverbs. Historical references to places and events, like to meet one's Waterloo. That was fatal, final defeat. To go to one's Canossa, to fight a bullet and shame yourself, to appease the powerful person in that sense. These have been said many times in conferences. Sometimes I wasn't ready, many times and more times today. I am glad that I knew that. Historical references are very important. 7th of July. What is 7th of July? Is it Tanabata? When the two lovers meet in the Milky Way, or from both sides of the Milky Way. One is the cowherd, Kengyu, and Shokujo is the weaver, the girl who weaves the fabric. Once a year, the 7th of July, they come to the Milky Way and have a rendezvous, right? 7th of July. Beyond that 7th of July is when the Japanese troops attacked the Chinese at the bridge, Marco Polo Bridge. But unless you know that in English Marco Polo Bridge is in Japanese Rokokyo, you people are well educated, you know Rokokyo. That's a Chinese name that bridge. And when you hear about Rokokyo, you should be able to say Marco Polo Bridge, because people talk like that. What happened at the Marco Polo Bridge on this date, 49 years ago, changed the fate of Asia? People talk like that. Young interprets. Having never heard of Rokokyo or Marco Polo Bridge, helpless. It's very important that we equate Rokokyo with Marco Polo Bridge. There are many names like that in the world. People's names. We are used to anglicized names. St. Petersburg. You can't say that when you're talking about the Russian city. It has to be St. Petersburg. Because St. Petersburg is in Florida. To us, the Russian place name came to us as Russian. So it's St. Petersburg. It's not Peter, it's Piotr, the Russian Tsar, Russian Emperor. In English, Peter, yes, but it's not like a Peter the wolf. Peter and Piotr. All these things. King Henry, if it's in a German context, it has to be Emperor Heinrich. In Japan, you have to say Heinrich. If you say Henry, or Japanese one. So we have to know the Japanese and English and native sound. But it's interesting, it's still like it. I like my job. Well, you have some interesting questions. Appreciate it. So please come back with more questions. Yeah. I have some reading materials. Did you get that, Paul? Yes. Yes. After you finish, I have a few more items. But if you read this, the last chapter, that might be interesting about how I started as a cloud typist, how I pushed my way to an interpreter. I just asked my boss, give me a chance as an interpreter. I will be good for you. Because this is library. We can always buy the books at 20% discount. You please me very much if I'm asking for it. Okay? It's been long afternoon, but I enjoyed it. Thank you very much. I'm sorry Mr. Chinen didn't show up. Would you like to borrow the tape for the first part? Yes.
Thank you.
Good job.
See you in next week.
What is my day?
Next Sunday.
One Sunday, not this Sunday.
Right.
This Sunday I'm going skiing.
Skiing?
Where?
Yes. Yamagata, northern Honshu, Gassan. Combine onsen, hiking, and skiing. There's a little patch of snow still left until early August. I did that 2 years ago. I've done it many times. So I'm bringing some of my students. This time only 5 Paralympic skiers go.
I'm a fanatic skier, but I'm also a fanatic skier.
Wait until winter.
I do.
Good job. A changing language and changing values, the subject that passes. That's why I mentioned that. And since I changed the tape, I should repeat it again for the recording. It's a small step for an astronaut. That would be politically correct thing to say. Questions, comments, requests at this time?
How many Sanat interpreters operated when NHK broadcasted running?
For NHK, it was mainly Nishiyama Sen-san and a couple of the younger interns assisting him. I worked for Komatsu-san and I worked for Fuji Television and TV Asahi. Someone else worked for another station and so on. Altogether, every TV station used simultaneous interpreting, and radio station too. So probably 15 to 20 interpreters. It was quite exciting. We liked it. Often we couldn't understand the sound that was coming from out of this world. Gobble, noise. Famous case of a veteran interpreter who didn't hear what was being said about the descent engine. Descent is Kapone, D-E-S-C-E-N-T, descent engine. That landing craft is called LM, landing module. No, lunar module, LM. Has an engine for coming down. Apparently, blow that engine to slow it down the speed of descent. It's called the descent engine. And somebody was mentioning from the space or NASA control station, but descent engine start something. He heard it and said diesel engine. But diesel is the most primitive kind of an engine. It's very heavy. You don't use it, honestly. But it's one of the humorous instances. But there were better ones, much better. They're not classic stories. Like if you read Nishiyama-san's books, he has written a few books in Japanese. Very interesting about his interpreting experiences. He's very aged. He's in his mid-70s. Still plays tennis. Nishiyama-san is a U.S. born, University of Utah. And he used to speak Japanese with an American accent. Now, pretty good. I can always tell he's Japanese. It's not native Japanese. But of course, educated. He's an engineer, electrical engineer. That's one reason we recommended him for NHK, because he was an employee of the American Embassy also. After the astronauts came back, there was an interview asking the astronauts. A Japanese interviewer asked, 宇宙人を見ました。宇宙人, what do you make out of? What's 宇宙人? That's what he thought. That is it. 宇宙もっと人じゃなくてね、人はね、人愛の人、ゴミね、dust. I can't write that to Chuchin. It's a complicated character meaning dust. There's such thing as space dust. You can see from the windows of your spacecraft something flaky, floating. You don't know what they are. They were called Uchujin. There was a big discussion about what that was, what causes it. And the interview, a science journalist asked the space astronaut, 宇宙人を見ましたか? Nishiyama-san thought it was a spaceman. Did you see a spaceman? What? An alien? What? Don't want to be space dust. So it's a homonym. It's these things happen, in fact, almost all the time. I made a little mistake yesterday, immediately corrected myself. There was one Mr. Kawai. Kawai-san is the chairman of the Komatsu, famous bulldozer carrier, Komatsu selection. And he was very fine. And the Japanese chairman wanted to show his respect to the very elder member of the Japanese delegation. He said, それでは次に河合さん. And he said, 河合さん. He did not enunciate河合さん. He said, 河合さん. I thought I had the 河瀬. And because we were talking about exchange rates. Now, next exchange rate. And then Mr. Kawai began speaking. I need to get it. So I immediately corrected myself. How do I correct myself? One thing I never do is I don't say, I'm sorry. Because if I say I'm sorry, it sounds as if this chairman was just saying, I'm sorry. That's putting the blame on him. I say, correction. Very, very matter of fact. Correction. telegraphic. Now next exchange matter. Correction, it wasn't exchange. Mr. Kawai, maybe more or less were confused, but at least they will forget that correction exchange. And in Japanese, I insist that we should say teisei, meaning correction. Teisei instead of sirei itashimashita. Still too many young interpreters, particularly young, very nice women interpreters. Because they are women and because they are nice and gentle, they tend to say sirei itashimashita. They were so polite and feminine. That bothers me. Because the audience cannot tell if it's an apology from the speaker, which it's not. Then that's putting the blame on the speaker, right? So I always try to tell, say, correction, teisei. Do it quickly, but efficiently. And people understand. That is not to interject ourselves into the picture too. Because I'm sorry means I is the interpreter. We never say I. I think the chairman has just said a wonderful thing. I think it's very clever. We never say that. The interpreter repeats only what other people say. But to say "失礼しました" is interjecting one's own thought. We don't interject our personality or personal taste or conviction. Remaining absolutely neutral. Yeah, I talk about Tonga. Please ask me questions. Now you can give me a break. Yes.
Goes by any other name. Is the book the name of the book? The movie the name of the book? Is that
It's interesting you should ask that question. Actually, that's a very perceptive question. The answer is no. Umberto Eco, the author himself, denies that the title has nothing to do with Shakespeare.
I think that's probably right.
And I bought a very thin paperback by Umberto Eco. It's a collection of essays, rather irrelevant essays, after the name of the rose, in which he said, interestingly, most English-speaking people associate the title of my book with Romeo and Juliet. In fact, it has nothing to do with it. Maybe it has to do something because he was talking about the, what's the nomenclature, what's the word, the Kigoro. You are scholars, what's the science of symbol.
Semasiology. Semasiology.
Semasiology? How does it?
In English.
In English.
The study of signs.
Science.
So there's
Not those physical signs, but the names you give to different articles.
semantics.
Not semantics, no. Something a little more complicated. I used to remember, but I forgot. What is semiology?
Semiology.
Yeah, semiology. Yeah, semiology. Kigoron. So, isn't that Kigoron? Yes, semiology. To Umberto Eco, that was a matter of assigning a code.
Semiotics.
Semiotics, thank you. Semiotics. Yeah. But apparently, to Umberto Eco, it has nothing to do with Romeo and Juliet. But remotely they are related. Yeah. But it's very interesting. Good question. How do you like that movie? How often did you see it? Once? Oh, I've seen it 4 times.
The book is brilliant.
Apparently.
Really important.
Apparently, I don't have patience or time to read the whole thing. I read few pages. But more than that, I met Mr. Umberto Eco.
Did you really? He's
Exciting.
I've read almost everything.
You have. My. You are a scholar.
Just did happen to be lucky to get on some of mine.
I was very fortunately visiting the University of Indiana, and right next, there's Purdue next?
Sure.
Purdue and Indiana, double campus, your campus, whatever they call it. And it so happened that they were having an international congress of seminar on communication and semiotics. And Japan American Society of Indiana hosted a pre-seminar dinner with me as speaker. And Umberto Eco said, I would like to come. I was so flattered. He could not come. But he was at least nice enough to at least say, I hope I can come. If not, please But he was very interested. And he delivered the following day a lecture, which was very, very esoteric, difficult to understand. But it is good sense of humor, and often he was laughing at his own jokes. He thought he was clever. But most people didn't understand how clever he was. But it was interesting. Nice man.
He wrote another book called Pendulum.
Foucault's Pendulum, yes.
Said if you read that book, then you kind of understand the reference of the name of the rose. It refers to medieval religious societies, secret societies.
Yeah. Foucault's Pendulum. That's also available in paperback. But it will take us months to read the books. I'm waiting for Foucault quotations. Yeah. Umberto Eco's quotation. Yeah, that's it. If somebody would pick up the...
But it would have to be in Italian.
Yeah, or in English. Piacere in English. Other questions? Anyone?
How was the what you integrated
But Apollo.
So the song is very difficult.
Yes. So we had to do a lot of guesswork, what we call educated guess. You study a lot. I did study a lot. I studied lunar geography. I obtained the map of the moon's surface. I verbalized all the place names, mostly Latin names. Name of the sea, mer something, M-E-R, mare, or mer in French. The Sea of Tranquility. It's also written in Latin name. And I used to remember most of these, names of mountains and craters. Some craters were named by men or women who discovered them. And I tried to pronounce them, read them aloud, so that when I hear them, I recognize them immediately. And it did a great deal.
Because the time is 1969.
69. 1 year before the Expo, Osaka.
So maybe facilities were up there.
It was done in Tokyo, in NHK, and in the television stations, because through the satellite, the voice and pictures did come to Tokyo, and from Tokyo TV stations, it was broadcast all over the country, and people were literally glued to the TVs. It was an exciting event. Imagine, for the first time, we ventured out of this earth and landing on the moon. I have a couple of very good documentary videos of moon landings and other adventures. If anyone is interested, I'd be very happy to lend them to you. But very often, yes, you did not hear the sound, but you guessed sometimes. And educated guess is what you need. People who did not do the kind of homework that I did made mistakes. There was a ridge, Samyaku, how high nobody could tell, but long straight line on the surface of the moon, which was nicknamed US #1, meaning US highway. US #1, US 1, you generally US 1, right? Runs on the east coast of the United States, all the way from around Boston to New York, Washington, all the way to Florida. That's US 1. That's like Tokaido. It's ancient. One of the oldest highways in America. It's not in good repair. It's not in very modern superhighway or freeway. It's old, US 1. But because it's vertical, north to south, someone was nicknamed US 1. when I was listening to the broadcasting by the astronaut flying over it, across west and east, I suppose, if there's west and east on the moon. We were flying over US-1. So since I knew what US-1 was, I said in Japanese, 今、US-1 と名付けられている300を超えました、or something. I added, it's a mountain range. But, 朝日新聞、there's some incredible people there. Next morning, apparently they should listen to my interpretation. Next morning, Asahi Shimbun reported in Japanese. We are flying over the moon. Our ride is as comfortable as driving on the U.S. highway number 1. 国道1号を飛ばしてなきゃ。It was so smooth, as if we were driving on the U.S. highway number 1. I know, I lived in Washington, D.C. for 10 years. U.S. 1 is bumpy. Yeah, all the boards are bumpy. It's an old road. A lot of traffic signals. U.S. 1 is no freeway. Anybody who knows America knows it. But it was these reporters who don't know America and who don't have good listening comprehension, who have not done their homework. I had read the maps. I knew what the U.S. 1 was. And I knew what the real U.S. 1 was. Interesting. Please.
While you were working as an interpreter, you continued to study in Waseda University and George Washington University. Could you tell us what you majored in at the universities, and did what you learned at the universities help you work as an interpreter?
Yes.
Well, the reason why I ask a question like this is that some people say learning English at school is not for good for practical use, such as business work like that.
Nothing could be further from truth. I spent 5 long years, night courses, Waseda, 第二文学部, second English language department. While working first as part, that was after I became an interpreter, 1950, age 19, coming 20. I started going to Waseda in the evenings. And as I progressed in my occupation post-career to one of the highest paid interpreters. When I was 25, because I studied seriously literature, Shakespeare, T.S. Eliot, Beowulf. Yeah. I don't remember any of the damn thing, actually, Beowulf particularly. But it was interesting. Because of my evening study, the English I wrote in translation or English I spoke in interpreting was a little different from other interpreters. My bosses, fortunately all of my bosses were educated, intelligent people. They could tell the difference. So they every now and then gave me a pay raise. And probably I just had a little touch of literary quality in my writing or in my speech that most other interpreters did not have. So I never regret having gone to Waseda in the evenings. I was going to take 6 years, because some of you I know take 4 years, 5 years to do this course. No, however, you have your full-time daytime job. So did I. To me, the day's job, daytime job as an interpreter was the most important. Pleasure, weekends, second. Waseda, third. Waseda will be always there, I thought. So instead of doing it in 4 years, I'll do it in 5, 6 years. But then my miscalculation was toward the end of the 5th year, I passed the exam by the US State Department to go to Washington and become a simultaneous interpreter. So what? I'll come back in a couple of years. Waseda will be there. I didn't come back for 10 years. Waseda was still there. So my patience won. Waseda, after I wrote a book or so, gave me status as a Suisen Koyu, recommended to the status friend of the university. That's a very honorable title. And I checked with Waseda. What do you call it in English? We must have formal translation. The answer was no. And they said, we don't care. So I translated as honorary Bachelor of Arts. That's more rare than honorary doctors.
Sure.
There are plenty of honorary PhDs. All of them, those politicians, they will become Mayo Hakase, honorary doctors. And what is honorary DAs? One of the very few. And besides, whoever says, I did not graduate from Waseda University is an honest person. Ones who say, I have degree here and there, sometimes they're suspect. In fact, a few years ago, there was such a swindler who masqueraded as a graduate. That was when I was more, people thought I was more honest, because I said I didn't graduate. And about George Washington, that was after I finished my 5 years of interpreting in America. I became tired of interpreting at that time. I thought, no more parrot. I didn't want to be a parrot. And that's what I felt at that time. So I quit the interpreting job and took non-interpreting, non-traveling job, an economic research job. Then I felt that I better study economics. I was an economist first and then studied economics. So I call myself fake economist. And I started going to George Washington University. I checked with Georgetown and George Washington. Georgetown was a bit for the suburb. It was very, very formalistic campus. 1960. Girls, people, the word girls were used. Girls had to wear skirts. No jeans. Boys, men had to wear blazer coats and ties all the time. Very formalistic. Although I wore business suits all the time, I just didn't like the formalistic atmosphere. Jesuit school. Nothing wrong about Jesuit school, but the whole atmosphere is very conservative. By contrast, Georgetown campus was in District of Columbia. Amidst government agencies and business buildings. There's no campus. Campus is mixed with other government buildings. And people who come and study in the evenings are often government officials and Pentagon people from across the river. And when I taking some of my courses in economics, to my left sat a very young blonde girl from Kansas, real wholesome kind of American girl, right girl next door. And then to my right, there was a Navy captain, Hyman Tyson. Distinguished looking. He had an important job at the Pentagon daytime, but in the evening he was taking economics. I met many interesting people. So here again, 4.5 years, and I was pretty close to getting a BA in economics, but then I had to come back to Japan to start science. So altogether, 9 years, 2 universities, no degree. That is a distinction. The problem is, whenever I'm introduced as a speaker, particularly, the master of ceremony likes to be polite to the guests. They always overstate your biographical data. They will very often say, Mr. Muramatsu, graduate from Waseda, graduate from... I just have to politely correct him. So that he will not lose his face, I often say, the chairman or chairperson or master of ceremony, out of politeness, almost always overstate the people. I did not mention. I am sorry. But, really to come to your question, yes, both were very helpful. Because I studied literature, I think I sound probably a little more, I hope, elegant in my English rendition. Because you can use elegance or style. But otherwise it could be pretty routine and boring. Keep talking about same trade balance deficits year in, year out. And those business people talk all like, particularly the Japanese bureaucrats and business people. Everybody talks alike. You can almost precisely predict how he is going to finish his sentence. So interpreting into English, one is relatively easy for someone like us who know the background. And two, it becomes so boring. Because if you translate word for word, sentence for sentence, everybody sounds alike. So I exercise my interpretive license I like poetic license. In poem, you can say unrealistic things because it's poetry, right? Poetic license, political license, interpretive license. Within my discretion. Never overstretching it. Never cutting anything out. I don't edit. I don't change the emphasis. I don't take anything out. I don't add anything. But in the way I repackage it, I present it to be a little more effective in conveying the message, a little more pleasant to hear, to listen. So because of my little bit of study of literature, I think it helps me. And because I studied economics principles, international economics, price and income, trace of business cycles, I think I understand economic subjects probably better than most other interpreters. So the minute I hear a keyword, I know it's concrete. I know this school of thought. And I can sound almost like an economist. In fact, I shouldn't really say this, but more than a few times, people from my audience later came to me and said, "You must have studied economics, or are you an economist?" Or once in a foreign correspondence club speech, or some Japanese politician I was interpreting. Later, an American journalist came to me and asked, and remarked, he had known me for some time. He said, "Muramatsu-san, I've always known you as an accurate interpreter, but today you have literally poetry. I like that. And that encouraged me. So that encouraged me to even refine my delivery more. Particularly for ceremonial speeches, opening remarks, vote of thanks, concluding remarks. Let us meet again next year. You can say these things in a very, very prosaic manner, almost like telegrams. Conference is now concluded. Next meeting will be 1 year from now. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen. Now instead, you can say, our 2-day session has come to a very productive end. The guy didn't say anything like productive, but he probably means it. It was productive. He's happy that we have come to a nice ending, and he means to please the audience. He means to amuse or entertain the audience. The audience like a little bit of entertainment. Nothing wrong about adding fruitful or productive. These adjectives mean very little. Just a 飾り。例えば、もしいろんな人がスティーブ・ジャパニーズでこれでめでたく、もしくは無事に開園するめでたく、ceremoniously or happily, no. Spiritual imagination a little bit. We have now come to a very happy ending of our, instead of conference, meeting, instead of using same word over and over, I change it, I paraphrase it, like our undertaking, our exercise. We have very promising enterprise. A nice word, good American. Many of these are interchangeable. And one difference between Japanese and English is, in English you do much more paraphrasing when it is not necessary. In terms of meaning, probably you should stick to the same first word used, but you don't do that.
It's literary.
It's more literary to keep changing. Suppose if I'm speaking of a guest speaker, and it's my pleasant duty to introduce our guest speaker for the day. And next time you give you guest speaker. Our guest of honor is a product of Waseda University. And instead of saying he, say, and as you can see, our friend speaks both languages. Says our friend. And you do that all the time. Consciously or almost unconsciously probably. It's supposed to be good manners. It has more grace. In Japanese, you cannot do it. So in English, there's more room for the interpreters to use our license for paraphrasing. As long as the meaning is clear, and as long as by doing so, the intended meaning and the intended style of the speaker comes across better. I do that. That's what people that you will interpret achieve. Not because I'm just accurate word for word. In fact, the word for word and translation is something I despise. Can't interest me. If other people like to do that and can do it, I'm happy. I do not do that. I like to put literally quality. It's to keep everybody awake. That is better communication. Staying awake. That means when a speaker says something elegant, I should sound elegant in my rendition. Right? So I have to be very read. I have to have read Shakespeare and Marvelous and Through the Looking Glass and all that. And also Savoy operas, Gilbert and Sullivan. They have to quote it. You know Savoy operas? Gilbert and Sullivan? I think it's important for the students of English language. They are not performed here. Have you heard of Mikado? That's Gilbert and Sullivan. Comic operas from Britain called Savoy operas. They are operettas. Somewhere between Broadway musicals and operettas from Vienna, right? Not as serious as real operas, where people die of love. I don't like. I like operettas, and I like Broadway musicals, and I like Savoy operas. Savoy operas are comic operas. Gilbert and Sullivan. Look up dictionary quotations under Gilbert and Sullivan. 2, 3, 4 pages. Very funny. Music. Witty. That's the one of the most sophisticated form of English. Very clever. Around the turn of the century, end of 19th century, early 20th century. Mikado is not a satire about Japan. Many people are mistaken about it. I've read Japanese journalists report on performance of Mikado, complain that the kimono, hidarimae, is not folded right, and the dresses and names are like Chinese, like Yom. I can't remember these crazy sounding names. They don't sound like Japanese. And the headgear and dresses are China, Japan, and Mongolia, India, all mixed up. That's all right. Because the English people, Gilbert and Sullivan at that time, wanted to produce a satire of the British upper class, the nobility, make fun of them. And they just borrowed a distant, exotic country. People knew very little about Japan. So we chose the title, Mikado. And there was the Lord High Executioner, the Kubigiri no Kami. There's no such title in Japan. But it's their own very, very sophisticated satire of the British nobility. How silly, ridiculous they are. Gilbert and Sullivan, it's very Mikado, and they are not performed yet. Because language is not easy to understand. Many people may take offense. But in fact, at the time of the death of Emperor Taisho, one before the last emperor, in Britain they stopped performing Mikado while the country was in mourning. Remember, it was the days when there was an alliance between Britain and Japan, Anglo-Japanese alliance, in fact, a political and military alliance. So British stopped performing Mikado. They feared that that might offend some Japanese people. In those days, it might have. Another reason I take keen interest in Gilbert and Sullivan is how many of you have seen the movie Pretty Woman? All of you. Good, great. How did you enjoy it? Did you learn anything new? One thing I learned, how shrewd American businessman buys out a company, right? Yeah, spreading the rumor. Like the Navy is going to cancel that order for so many ships, that will bring down the value of that small company stocks, and they will buy it. Shrewd. That's how they do it. It's much better than reading the textbooks of management. See the movies. Remember Richard Gere takes his What's her name? No. The girl. Yeah. This actress name.
Julia Roberts.
Julia Roberts. Takes Julia Roberts to an opera in San Francisco by a chartered private jet, right? She wearing red gown for the first time. She had never seen opera. She was shown to the box. She said, "Wow, there's a band." Remember? There's a band. She had never seen one. But as opera goes, that's Madame Camelia. But the woman, somewhat similar to her in the circumstances. She's moved, she sobs, and he's obviously pleased to see that his girlfriend, his sweetheart, began appreciating art. When opera was over, or stand up and applaud, just the matronly woman, the next box, obviously a woman from very rich class, asked this young woman, "Did you enjoy the opera, dear?" Remember that scene? That is in the typical upper class affected English, right? And to say, "Did you enjoy the opera, dear?" Dear is a kind of an older person talking to a young person, right? In Japanese, by the way, if I were interpreting that kind of speech, I would put that into appropriate, similar sound in Japanese. Opera, or something. Affected tone. I'm superior to you. Remember what she replied? Julia Roberts. That's right. That's right. In academic interest, I will repeat those dirty words. She said, "It was so good. It was so good." She didn't say that. "It was so good, I almost peed in my pants." I almost peed in my pants. わかるでしょ？漏らしちゃったね。よかった。That old woman asked the question very politely, if somewhat condescending, patronizing, no ill meaning. But she replied in a very vulgar, street language. いいのあんまり良くて漏らしちゃいそうになったよ。It was so good, I almost peed in my pants. And the old woman couldn't believe what she said. She said, and that is when that gentleman in shining armor, white horse, comes to her rescue very quickly. Richard Gere tries to cover her by saying, "Oh, she said she liked it better than the Pirates of Penzance." Remember? That's right. Remember? Pirates of Penzance. Did you hear that? Did you know the Pirates of Penzance? Did you know the Pirates of Penzance?
I've heard.
You heard that the dialogue? Yeah.
No, not the dialogue.
No, you heard about the title, Pirates of Penzance.
But it's, I've heard it many times. How is it? How is it?
You know the context. Yeah, the reference to it. You knew that there was a comic opera with the title Pirates of Penzance, right? Because you knew the title, you were able to hear that word. Did you hear that? I checked many people. I tested dozens and dozens of Japanese people, including many returnees. Even the returnees with the best of the listening comprehension, the ones who had not known that title, did not hear the Pirates of Penzance. Some heard Pirates. Penzance, what is Penzance?
The name of the place.
Name of a port city in southwestern England. And because I had earlier taken interest in Mikado, and I had read about Gilbert and Sullivan, I had noticed mentally the title, The Pirates of Penzance. I was always wondering what it was like. I didn't know it was Penzance or Penzance. I asked the Americans something we didn't know. What is it? And then in the Treaty Woman, I heard that mentioned. Rachel yesterday. Oh, she said she liked it better than Pirates of Penzance. That's it. Pirates of Penzance. And he said that because it sounds similar. So similar. Peed in my pants and Pirates of Penzance. Remember that audio after saying, "Oh!" And she repeats, "Pirates." She can't quite convince herself, right? Yeah. It doesn't rhyme. Naturally. But they quickly get away, right? I thought that was fantastic scene. That's it. So that's the Pirates of Penzance I've heard about. So there began my quest for more information. I always ask questions.
I have just about anybody I run into. After how do you do, and then introduce myself, over a cup of tea, coffee. By the way, I have a question. How popular Pirates of Penzance in America? Have you seen that play? And so on. Many people answer, and the general summary of the answers is that anyone who would go to college would have heard of Pirates of Penzance. Many who have seen it, right? High school dropouts probably know, right? Serious people who would go to college and university would have heard about it and may have seen it. And then I began reading more about the Savoy Opera. I learned that Pirates of Penzance was first performed in New York, 1901, not in London. For some strange reason. In fact, the opening of the play was delayed by a week or two because somebody forgot to bring the whole libretto or the scores, music sheets, and couldn't open it and waited for another ship to arrive. So it stands to reason that the Pirates of Penzance is pretty well known among Americans. That is why Richard Gere used that word. But then among the movie boys, people watching that movie, many may not understood it. But there are lots of things said in the movie that not everyone understands. I suppose producers don't care. Because that makes the movie sound a little more clever, right? Then you asked me what the story was about. You know the story, Pirates of Penzance? I have a wonderful news for may shock you, particularly you. Maybe when you speak as well.
I will shock you.
Because I kept asking this question, why is it Pirates of Penzance so famous? Or have you seen it in song? Finally, after about 20 or 30 questions, my friend said, by the way, man, did you know that the story is about the confusion between pilot and pirate? What? Can you believe what I said? The story is based on mistake by a native English speaker between a pilot and a pirate. So I obtained the book, read it, yes, and immediately in the same day I went to the record shop that's open until 5 a.m. Roppongi, Kawen Book Center. No, not that record shop, not that bookshop. Nearby there's a record shop, Wave, that's open until 9 p.m. Went there and bought under the musical section. I found Gilbert and Sullivan. In fact, I bought Pirates of Penzance CD. Rushed to my car in the garage, another stuff, I listened to it, found it, bingo. There's a story about the man who had a little boy, son, who was very brave and seafaring. And he wanted to make him a pilot. Izusaki Anna, pilot, who would be on a small boat to usher a huge ship of Izusaki Anna, pilot. So the man told the boy's nurse's maid to this there, like a housemaid, bringing him up. Nurse's maid, nanny. Take him to an apprenticeship as a pilot. And she admits, because I'm a stupid nurse's maid, always has some interesting nautical idiom about making mistakes. And besides a bit hard of hearing, I mistook my master's instruction, took him to a pilot instead of a pirate, and bound him to an apprenticeship until his 20th birthday. Right?
And he's
Right.
now I remember.
Now I remember. But that's case of L and R. After all these years, we've been told, native speakers never make mistakes, they do, under some circumstances. Even this is a fiction. If it's totally unfounded, fiction will be fine. Because sometimes pilot can be misheard as pirate, vice versa. And this really was the breathtaking discovery for me, because when 4 or 5 years after Henry was born, in early imported movies, I'm sure that's pretty sure it's Robert Louis Stevenson's Treasure Island. A ship near somewhere in the Caribbean Sea. Calm sea, two English boys, teenagers. One says to the other, I think I heard somebody say pirate. The other boy says, no, you call it pirate. It was definitely that scene, and I mean to find the video of all the pirate movies, one after another, actually. One day I'll find it, and I'll show it to my class. On the second instance, mistake between L and R. So the distinction is not all that impossible. So it's giving me much better health. I feel much more at ease. So to the students who suffer torture by their dedicated teachers, tell them about the types of things, but I tell them you should arm yourself, do your homework, and arm yourself with the script and the original section. Right? And then, if they're good sports, they're also sorry, we make mistakes. Movies are interesting. I see a lot of movies.
I like to teach movies.
Good.
As a way of learning.
You know, there's a legal problem. Copyright is we are supposed to. That's ridiculous.
I'm good secret.
Well, I show my videos in a classroom which I temporarily for 2 hours and so rent as my summer college. And I tell my students, I'm going to watch it. Do whatever you want. And they all stay. So that you won't violate the law. But nobody has sued me to FBI. But movies, have you seen My Cousin Vinny?
Yes, I have.
Isn't that a great comedy?
It is. Yeah, really good.
Isn't it? Itoko no Vinny. My Cousin Vinny. V-I-V-L-E.
There's a great language in that one too.
Language.
Great.
And the comedy of cross-cultural encounters between big city, New York, and the real boondocks, real inaka, Alabama. And very, very funny. And that actress, she won the Academy Support Actress.
Did she?
Oh, yeah. What's her name? Yeah, this time today. Very splendid. And the guy, Joe Pesci,
It's great.
really is great. Very funny. And I've seen it about 12, 13 times. Never get tired. Every time I see it, I find little something new, something I had not noticed before. Little accent, little touch, little throwaway remark.
I always tell my students if they want to learn English, you want to learn to speak English, study movies.
Selected movies.
Selected movies.
My cousin rented at the video shop. And it's a great primer for Southern accent. I'd recommend it if you go to the South. And that magistrate, the judge, is great. The actor died just before the Academy was he reprimanded Joe Pesci, this rookie lawyer, for his bad English. He comes from Brooklyn. He's not very bright. He says, he used long words, bad pronunciation. You can't quite pronounce youth. Right? Remember, two youths, meaning two young men. Why would you say yes? He said, two youths, and I said, two what? Youth. What is a youth? Remember this? Oh, youth. Anyway, he goes on. And at one point, judge, speaking about the bad English language, he said, in the language of our ancestors, remember? And then there was an African American stenographer. He said, what are you talking about? It's not my ancestors. That would be her expressions. That scene wouldn't have been necessary 20 years ago. And today, Hollywood movie makers have to insert the scene like to show that they are conscious. to be politically correct. To the descendants of the slaves, English is not the language of their ancestors, right? So to make any sweeping general statement like in the language of our ancestors, it's not politically correct. African Americans don't like it, naturally. That was very interesting. There are numerous things like it.
Dr. Recipe used the meaning in her class, social linguistics.
I rented that video too. Good friends. We always exchange information.
Yeah, she often uses videos in
Oh yeah.
social linguistics because that's where you're going to get actual examples of real English or real language.
English at work with all the physical gestures and environment. That way you really learn how that phrase or word is. And Joe Pesci protests the way his girlfriend is not cooperative and said, Your Honor, she's a hostile witness. And she replies, if you think I'm hostile, wait until I see you tonight. Right? Yeah. Notice she said, if you think I'm hostile, wait until I see you tonight. Not later this afternoon, not this evening. Tonight. They're sleeping together. Tonight, definitely indicates that, right? If you're not man and woman in that conversation, you will say, wait until see you tonight. Right? See you tonight, we'll go to bed together. I don't have much practical experience, but I can tell. Watching movies is the nearest thing to have to real experience. Virtual reality. So theater is great cross-cultural comedy. It's a must for people. Yeah. They're showing more movies too. No. I should go on.
Well, speaking of
Yes.
movies, I am interested in when you think about the translation that occurs in Japan of the movies.
Mhm.
And,
Movie subtitles.
yeah, the subtitles.
I know quite a lot about it actually. You're interested in that?
Well, I'm interested because very often I've seen that the translations are not accurate.
No.
And I'm wondering about what difficulties translators have with that.
One, they are very, very abridged. Inaccurate occasionally, not as often as you think. They have to be abridged because you cannot read everything you hear. Subtitles, jimaku, has to be only 2 lines, 3 lines at 2 lines. And each line should contain no more than about 10 letters. Not all 10 hiraganas, because that makes it harder to read because they're phonetics. You should have a few kanji. If there are kanjis, because they're ideograms, we recognize the patterns more easily. We don't have to read each kanji to get the meaning right away. I recommend actually to my students to look at the subtitle. Don't read it for 5 seconds. Glance at it, 1 to 3 seconds, get the gist of it, catch 1 or 2 key words, and then listen because the actual sounds start at the time when the subtitle is shown, but sounds continue generally longer. Look at subtitle and listening, you hear the English word of the kanji that you saw there. Like typically in Shakespeare, if you see the character, maybe something like crown. You hear the word crown, or maybe throne. If you didn't hear the word you expected, you just reason yourself, wow, that must be another word. That's how you learn also. And I know at least one person who does translation of movies. The famous woman, Toda Natsuko. She's the absolute top in this field. She's fast, the graduate of Tsuda. As far as English is concerned, she's reasonably well learned. But beyond that, she's all self-taught. And you know how many days it takes for such a person to translate one word? Average 5 days. I really can't believe it, and I don't really condone the practice. But they are
very popular. They're in very great demand. And so few of them who can do well that the door is really closed to newcomers. It's very hard for newcomers to get in because there are handful of veterans who translate one movie every 4 or 5 days. They just see the movie once and get the script and start translating. And check it again with the movie. And that's about it. Occasionally there are inevitably mistakes. And even someone like Tonanatsuko, who, by the way, is very nice person. I like her, she likes me. And she's a shy woman. In fact, she admitted that she didn't want to get up and speak in front of other people. That's why she became translator. She's shy as a public speaker. But when I invite her to the Simon Academy, she comes. She has given us, our students, lectures twice in Tokyo. Once she went to Osaka with me, for me. And in fact, we have audio cassette, video cassette for the lectures. You can borrow it. It's very, very interesting because she's honest. She tells us about many of her mistakes she made. And she openly shares her experiences. And there are lots of tricks apparently, not to bother with too much details. You cannot explain why that he said peeing my pants, she said peeing my pants, and why he said Pirates of Penzance. And many of the scenes requiring subtle cultural understanding cannot be explained, no matter how hard you try. And one thing important she has emphasized is subtitles should not distract you from the enjoying the movie. To enjoy the movies is the most important. If the translation is too accurate or takes too much time to read and understand, it disturbs the movie, spoils the fun. Here's the point. But she and her ilk, her colleagues, makes at least one mistake in one movie. I collect them. I don't publish them because I know it's a hard work. I cannot do it. I wouldn't do it, and I cannot do it because being simultaneous interpreter and in my style, I'm interested in details, and I like to refine it. But then it will not be productive for the movie goers.
Well, how about the movies where instead of the subtitles they use the super?
Yeah. Also dubbing.
Dubbing.
Yeah. In Japan, movies are never done that way. Never. For television, yes, but not movie houses. I don't know why. You know why?
Well, you can, in the video store you can get.
You can rent, that's right, yeah, voiceover. Yeah, voiceover store. But not in the big movie theaters, never. If you see in a big movie theater, Richard Gere speaking Japanese, will be turned off. It'll be very disillusioned. We don't want to see the rest. Yeah, we want the ticket refunded. Yes. We want to hear Richard Gere speaking his own voice in English, even though we don't understand. And we like to get the minimum meaning of something, right? Isn't that a psychology? Particularly with the French movies. All those French movie stars have to sound sexy with their nasalized French. We don't understand, but it sounds more sexy. Meaning, you see. But in America, seldom subtitles. Right? I understand that Dances with Wolves was the first movie with subtitles.
One of the first.
One of the first. There were others before. Yeah. In Europe, most American movies are shown with sound. I saw a Western with John Wayne in Austria, in ski resort, in German. It was very fun to watch John Wayne shouting in German. Especially because I didn't understand German. Children, that's it. You cannot expect children to read something. That's it. They ought to be dubbed over.
But it seems like there would be great difficulty in doing that because you have to be able to match. Theoretically, it should match at the times when the people are actually speaking.
Right. Those voice actors and actors, they do quite well. It's one written well. And those actors and actresses rehearse. And they do this lip synchronizing very well. Amazing.
I always enjoy watching movies and picking up these tiny little errors and making notes. That movie about, the Last of the Mohicans. I saw it twice. I caught one error. Errors happen in specialized fields like military terminology, technical subjects. And they're talking about French troops and English troops. And on the subtitle, I wasn't listening very carefully, but the subtitle said such and such French Shidan. Shidan is an army unit, division. Division? In those days? No. I know something of the military history. So I saw the movie second time. It said regiment. Regiment is a smaller unit. 3 or 4 regiments make up a division. Okay, let us resume and the last section of the evening. I will show you a video of somebody who is again very much in the news today. Let's see which one this is. Wait.
Is it VHS or beta?
Beta. Yeah, this is beta. Oh, it's not in. Oh, no wonder. That's what called the color video. color. Empty video.
日本の現実と社会に接することができます。けれども、どれだけ展覧会やテレビを見たり、本を読んでみたところで、正しい理解を作る上で、直接の体験に勝るものはありません。
Voice. Oh, let's hear.
That His Imperial Highness Prince Naruhito chose to continue his education at Oxford University. Although, as some of you may be aware, had I been asked, I might have advised him to choose Cambridge.
その意味で英国を訪れる日本人の数がますます増加しているのは大いに歓迎するところです。成人親王殿下が勉学を続けられるにあたってオックスフォード大学を留学先に選ばれたことも英国人にとっては大きな名誉であり喜びでありました。もっともご留学先選定にあたってもし私の意見が求められていましたら多分私の母校ケンブリッジの方をお勧めしていたと思います。
Notice how successfully I made him laugh? Because that was a humorous part. He was not serious. Prince Naruhito, of course he is Naruhito, chose Oxford with great honor, British. But had I been asked, I might have recommended to go to Cambridge. In Japanese translation, in my rendition, I said, 私の母校 Cambridge. You know, my alma mater. Because without that, the Diet members, my audience, may not have readily comprehended the humor. But notice the one guy who was laughing very hard, famous Hamako. Did you notice that? Hamada Koichi. He is a real maverick. He quit his diet seat for the second or third time. Once he quit, only he was accused for having lost a lot of money in gambling in Las Vegas and borrowed money. He said, all right, I'll take responsibility, quit. But now he's very popular as a television personality. He's written books and actually a very interesting guy.
Very conscious.
では大きな名誉であり喜びでありました。もっともご留学先選定にあたってもし私の意見が求められていましたら多分私の母校ケンブリッジの方をお勧めしていたと思います。
You like it? Okay.
This is one of my most favorite performances. I did very well. And notice the prince changed his tone when he was talking about Prince Narita. It was very sober and straight. But he said, had I been asked, by emphasizing that if he indicates the change in the tone of his speech, and I might have recommended to Cambridge. That's meant to be a joke, well-meant, light-hearted joke. It is not criticizing the Japanese Imperial Household Agency for choosing my rival school. No, on the contrary. So that should come across well. So I rehearsed it, and I delivered it with a change in my tone, more than subtle, so that everybody will understand it as a joke. And sure, everybody laughed, and actually few million people were watching it on television because this was broadcast on NHK, and they all had very warm impression of the Prince of Wales. That was important. You see, this was his state visit as a guest of the state. And basically, Britain and Japan are friendly countries. And here's the heir apparent to the British throne. Next, keep your fingers crossed. I'm not sure so. But he has to sound distinguished, at the same time sound personal, charming, humorous, which he is. And so in my delivery, I changed my tone, my voice. したがって、もしご選考にあたって、that so far still kind of formalistic. 多分私の僕、calculating very carefully to make sure everybody, sure enough they laugh. I'm very happy. After this assignment, amidst the roaring standing ovation, the Crown Prince and the Prince of Wales were being led out, and he stopped in front of me to thank me. That I had anticipated. The British Embassy man, there is a chance the Prince might do that. I think the British ambassador sort of gently prompted the Prince to might wish to thank me. It was on television. You can see that. It was very nice. So the Prince stopped and said, thank you for nice, good work or something. I couldn't hear. Trouble in listening comprehension, but it was very noisy. But it didn't matter. He thanked me, and I knew what I was supposed to say. I stood at attention and said, it's my great honor, Your Highness. I had rehearsed it. But then something unexpected happened. Princess Diana stopped and stood. She stood to offer her hand. And I squeezed her hand real hard. She had white mesh gloves. So I really didn't have skinship. They were comfortable, but tender, soft. And she was beautiful, and I almost fainted. And she said something like a joke. And much to my chagrin, I could not hear the whole thing. She was saying that because she felt at one time her husband was going so fast or so long, she was afraid that, said like as a joke, to comfort me, to commend me. So I said, I merely wanted to say, thank you, but voice was not coming. I couldn't say anything. But if you see this video, you can see it if you have time. You will see me full grin like that. But no voice was coming through. And I was seen by millions of people in Japan. And I was so taken by her charm that I don't know how I walked down the dive. After everybody else left, more or less, I just walked over back to the parking lot, went to my car, and wanted to open the door, no key. It was locked and key was inside. Because that morning, apparently, I locked my car with the key in. So I had to call somebody from the garage and he opened the door for me. And then I sighed. Well, I must have been really excited to lose control myself. Turned the switch on. Clutch was dead. But because I had on ignition position. That's when in Japanese say, 上がっていたのはバッテリーだけど、私もだけじゃなくてバッテリーも。That is untranslatable puns. 上がる。I had a stage fright. I was so excited I lost control of myself. バッテリーが上がる。バッテリー But in Japanese it's a pun, but not in English. This I quote to warn my audience not to do too much word plays. Word plays or puns are not translatable. Japanese word play is okay for someone like Mr. J. I call Paul, please, easy. Paul, because Paul understands Japanese, takes interest in our language. So he would enjoy listening, hearing some Japanese puns, but not to the average other people. It's too complicated. It's not funny when it's explained. And there was famous Japanese minister for agriculture in forestry. 1961, I was not there, but in one conference after the meeting, he invited his American counterpart, U.S. Secretary of Agriculture, Nomucho, to dinner, Japanese dinner. For pouring sake, he said to his guests that 日本人はお米を食べます。あなたの国は米国で仲良くしましょう。Was in trouble. He couldn't in trouble. And agriculture minister was very upset. Why don't you translate this? That agriculture minister is the father of President, the Deputy Prime Minister for Mr. Kono Ichiro, Kono Yohei, the late Kono Ichiro. He was quite a character. But that's one of those untranslatable puns, right? So if there's a non-Japanese person who knows some Japanese and knows that America is Beikoku, Kome is Bei, then it's okay to talk about it. In fact, someone like Paul would appreciate to enjoy it, but not others. Certainly, there's no justification for using the word plays in international meetings or cross-cultural communication. There are other wasteful, harmful, in fact, but English-speaking people do that very often. Americans.
I've heard that it's extremely common in Japan because we have so many homonyms, so many words.
Probably so. More common than in your case, probably. But that view is somewhat overstated because there are substantive jokes not relying on wordplays or homonyms, puns. We don't take trouble to tell them to you. So we more or less keep the best of our jokes to ourselves. That's my explanation. In fact, there are many Japanese jokes, particularly from the Edo period, classical stories, timeless, that are translatable to any languages can make anybody laugh. I've tried quite a few. I have built a lot of repertoire. This is not the comic storytelling class, but I can give you to illustrate my points. But in English too, I have seen many native English speakers trying to sound clever, use puns, amusing their own fellow countrymen or women, but nothing coming across to the people on the Japanese side. Puns are okay for us, interesting. Students language, yes. And the puns are very effective in teaching you or learning the double meaning of the word. 2 days ago I came up with a very clever one myself, unconsciously. We're talking about an American company that makes machines to reduce the garbage or rubbish into manageably disposable shapes or forms. The company is called Waste, WAST, Waste Management International. And we're talking about this over buffet, a lot of the rich food. And I was chatting with a good friend of mine who was putting on weight here. And I said we should be more concerned about our own waste management. WAIST, waste management. He thought that was very clever. And come to think of it, was clever. I didn't plan it. And I said, just talking about WAST, I automatically thought about waste, having food, eating well. So association was automatic. So I suppose I could do this because I know many homonyms.
Well, wordplays, puns are best when they're just not rehearsed or not planned.
Not rehearsed. Spontaneous puns are the best. And puns are awful if you didn't think of it first, right? Even though we see the puns that you have thought about are clever, but puns, gee, I wish I had thought about it, but that guy said first. That's not a good pun. But I have a very good or very bad bilingual pun. I give this to you. Puns, even the Bible has an injunction. Do you know that? No. 人はパンのみって言うものがある。That's a good test. What's Japanese word? Bread. Man does not live by bread alone. Doesn't the Bible say that? It is, in fact, quite clever. So therefore, people say, people, when the listener show disgust, it's a good pun. You're supposed to say, eh. But that's a form of admiration. So I accept it as a compliment. But now you say man, you say people. The Bible is being rewritten, right?
Well, some people are trying to rewrite it.
Yeah, difficult. You can always say, you don't live by pun alone, or you don't live by bread alone. I like it, but for fairly sophisticated people in terms of English. Puns are enormously interesting. Oh, and after this movie, I wanted to play an audio recording. See, I will tell you, it's the same person, Prince Charles, 2 weeks ago, over CNN when I was in Australia. I saw him on television, immediately audio, copied the tape, the sound.
I always felt the Catholic subjects of the sovereign are equally as important as the Anglican ones or the Protestant ones. Likewise, I think that the Islamic subjects or the Hindu subjects or the Zoroastrian subjects of the sovereign are of equal and vital importance.
Well, a reaction to the documentary has been building up in Britain. Joining us now in London is Nine's correspondent Mark Ferguson. Good morning to you, Mark.
This was broadcast right after the famous or controversial BBC documentary film based on interviews with Prince Charles, in which the prince confessed that he was not faithful to his wife. This part he's talking about the Church of England. He was talking about Hindu subjects, Zoroastrian subjects, and so on. Subjects are these citizens. Americans call them citizens. A subject, in that sense, has to be translated as Shinmin. But then, in next part, the interviewer asks, "Were you faithful to your wife?" You know what he was referring to. And he said, yes. And after dramatic few seconds, as somebody called it, he says, until our marriage was irreparably broken down. In other words, I was faithful to Diane until certain point. Beyond that point, he did not say, of course, who but he did admit that he was not faithful to his wife. Very controversial interview. There were two different kinds of stories in news. Queen is very upset about his having offered that publicly. Another news is Queen is pleased with his candor, etc. You never know. So interesting.
Well, that reference to the church or the faith, as he put it, has proved to be somewhat contentious. Is it still so in Britain?
Well, yes, that was the controversy a few days ago, but certainly since then there have been far more personal leaks that have taken over the headlines. I, along with 25 million other people in Britain, have been glued to the TVs this evening. The documentary is still going to air as we speak. Much of it was taken up with Prince Charles's public life, his duties, and in that the comment on religion. But towards the end, and the documentary is now creeping towards the end, it became much more personal. And certainly the most talked about exchange within the entire program was that of the relationship, or the alleged relationship, Prince Charles had with Camilla Parker Bowles. Now, while he mentions Camilla Parker Bowles during the documentary, he doesn't actually admit he had an affair with her, but this grab will show that he does admit he has committed adultery whilst married.
Did you try to be faithful and honourable to your wife when you took on the vow of marriage?
Yes, absolutely.
And you were?
Yes. Until it became irretrievably broken down. Us both having tried.
You've been very open about all of this and what you've said. Do you now hope that this issue and expect this issue to go away? Is that what you hope will now happen?
Well, it would be nice if it did, from everybody's point of view. I mean, I don't think many other people have to go through this constant attention, not just me, but others, when their marriages break down. I mean, as I've said before, it is a deeply regrettable thing to happen. But it does happen, and unfortunately, in this case, it has happened. It was the last possible thing that I ever wanted to happen. I'm not a total idiot. I'm unaware of all these problems. And as I was saying before, this business of predicting what everybody would say, it's not something that I went into marriage, with the intention of this happening.
Now, how is this?
Interesting. I don't know. I don't think it's a very good sport. Doesn't admit straightforward. I didn't want it to happen. On the other hand, it happened in this world. Unfortunately, in this case, it has happened. What is that? Doesn't sound like a man. Well, I don't have to vote. I shouldn't probably say this. It was interesting. But in the English language, too, you can be very vague. This is a very vague statement, right? Evasive. Very interesting. I collect all these sounds from radio and TV all the time. I have my tape recorder ready anytime. I did, if I were interpreting to this simultaneously, I would try to, of course, convey the prince's tone, vague, evasive expressions, not really trying to be articulate about it. It's also important in interpreting the speaker's speech, the style, how colloquial it is, how formal or dramatic or poetic it is, should, I believe, be conveyed through the interpreter. Not many interpreters, not certainly young interpreters, can do it. Don't want to bother doing it. I like to do it. When the speaker is sad, like when Richard Nixon announced his designation, I did it live for NHK. And in the beginning, he was almost confident. This is what 23rd time or umpteenth time I speak to the American people from this Oval Office. And I thought he was going to say, I'm innocent, I'm going to stay. But then his tone changed gradually. And he began saying that since I do not have the mandate of the people, the only thing is to step aside and so on. He became sad in his tone. In fact, his voice occasionally cracked, and he was nearly sobbing. I didn't know this, that somebody who was tape recording the television in Turkey sent me the cassette, and I have that cassette somewhere, if only I can find it, and said, Mr. Muramatsu, your voice began sounding sad, almost like Mr. Nixon. That was interesting. I did not do it as a theatrical performance, but because I suppose I sympathize with the speaker, no matter who and no matter what it is about. I become the speaker's alter ego, second person. I become sad, like having been forced to quit my job. And I suppose it shows in my tone. But I think it's important. And months later, I was extremely pleased when I heard that in some distinguished award, prize award exercise for journalists, apparently I was nominated as an outstanding journalistic. I didn't think my job was journalistic, but anyway, some people thought outstanding journalistic contribution to convey the mood, the tone of the President of the United States to the TV viewers. I thought that was interesting. So some people appreciate that.
Well, mood and tone is part of the meaning.
Indeed. You put it very well. So interpreting should never be really mechanical. You should not act. You're not an actor. But if you really put yourself on the same wavelength, same wavelength as the speaker, you naturally you sound like he does, or she does.
And if you don't, you might be doing a disservice to your listeners because you may miss a very significant part.
That's right. I did many dramatic speeches, and once in a conference in Kyoto about 20-some years ago, there was in fact an Interpol conference, International Criminal Police Organization. Chief of Police of Edinburgh, Scotland, collapsed and died while he was speaking in front of the microphone in the aisle. He had a heart attack. And I was interpreting his words into Japanese. And normally the booth was way up high. I'm looking down, I was looking at him. But then I saw him collapse and voice was not coming. What? Didn't move anymore. He died. And then I saw people gather around him, and some broad-shouldered non-Japanese person came to his rescue, mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, but it was too late. A little later I learned that man, the big guy, gave him mouth-to-mouth resuscitation, was one of the European language simultaneous interpreters. He was a Mexican with a medical doctor's degree and lived in Spain because he loved interpreting so much that he quit medical practice. But he was rushed down trying to help him. That was most interesting. So interesting interpreters in Europe. Some are real scholars. There aren't many in Japan. There are a couple interpreter businessmen like Komatsu and me. We both write and lecture, and somewhat public personalities. That's rather rare in Japan. That is why many people ask us this question. Don't you feel frustrated because you cannot express your own opinions? Some people may feel that way. I don't. I don't have to write for a lecture criticizing political figures or commenting on how Japan trade surplus should be reduced. That's not for me to worry about or comment on. My job is to interpret for the people arguing about these things as well as anyone can do to the best of my ability. So,
are there situations though where it's difficult to keep your
impartial?
Your own, keep impartiality?
I don't think so. I've never suffered that situation. I interpret for many people I personally would disagree quite vehemently, including Yasser Arafat, who was speaking in English with thick Arabic accent, very bad English actually, and with a lot of French accent overlaid on it, because I think he was French educated. But he was a terrorist. The man, he's a terrorist, he's a murderer, therefore. If anything, I tend to be a little pro-Israeli, but I do not let that interfere. I've interpreted for Israeli Minister of Foreign Affairs, but I've interpreted for Arabs, Islams, in this case, Arafat. But I say everything he says with his tone.
Is there ever a situation when you're interpreting, you have a choice of words that you could use, and either
Certainly
word would be defensible.
Yes.
But one word would be the audience one way, the
Yes.
other word would be the audience the other way.
Very perceptive question. And I think I will tell you exactly what happened 11 years ago or so, when Prime Minister Nakasone got into hot water by saying that, by comparing Japan to an unsinkable aircraft carrier. You remember that? Were you here? No.
I wasn't. But I do remember that.
Yeah, remember that incident. That is, in a way, my doing. Because he said in Japanese, 日本列島を大きな航空母艦のようにして、making the whole Japanese archipelago like one gigantic or big aircraft carrier. 米国や日本やその同盟国をソ連の SS-21 のミサイルから守るのであります。To defend Japan, the United States and their allies from the Soviet SS-20s and 20 missiles. That's how he said it. His tone in Japanese was self-confidence. We are making our island a big aircraft carrier. Planes can take off from Japan. That is an aircraft carrier or an aircraft carrier that does not sink, right? So in English, I exercise my interpreter license, a little poetic license, if you will. And I said, making our archipelago an unsinkable aircraft carrier. At that time, everybody involved liked that version. It was emphatic, conveyed Mr. Nakasone, the Prime Minister's tone very well, and they all nodded. Nakasone liked it. Ambassador Ambassador liked it. Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs liked it. Press officer liked it. It was done. And that part was off the record, not off the record. It was on the record. Reporters would report. And I have not spoken about it very much because I thought it might embarrass the Prime Minister. But what happened was, the next day in the press conference, the Japanese reporters asked Mr. Nakasone about, now you mentioned about unsinkable aircraft carrier, Fuchin Kubo. There's a difficulty. When I added word unsinkable, it was printed in the Washington Post. The Japanese reporters looked up the dictionary, and unsinkable would become as Fuchin. That is a pre-war military term. Unsinkable. There were unsinkable battleship. There were these dreadnoughts and that kind of motion. But it conveyed the tone very well. I wasn't like it. But Meanwhile, before the next press conference next day, the Soviet Russia reacted. They took that statement as very hostile, actually. So the Russians protested. Nakasone regretted. He wished he had not said it. And when the reporters used the word fuchin, which was not in his original Japanese, he said, okina, big pepper thing. I was more elegant than he. That was my mistake. And Nakasone, when asked that question by Japanese reporter, denied it. He said, no, I didn't say it. No, Fuchin I didn't say unthinkable. And he didn't. He didn't say Fuchin but that his Okina Kokugan interpreted unthinkable aircraft carrier. So that was said. That was on the record. That was the official interpretation. I did it as his official interpreter for the Japanese government. And everybody nodded. They approved my version. But Nakasone wished he had not said that. And in this case, I got into some trouble, I guess.
I don't think the problem is with the unsinkable though.
No.
I think the problem is with aircraft carrier. Yeah. Because it carries the feeling of it's very militaristic.
Very militaristic, very hostile posture. We are not going to let the Russians attack us or America. Japan is the bastion and fortress to defend all of us. And that is exactly the posture Nakasone wanted to convey to Americans, assuring the American people. But because he had regretted he had said that at all, because of Russians' criticism, he said, hearing the word Fuchin, he said, I didn't say that. And the Washington Post said, yes, he said it. They published the tape and transcript. And the Washington Post published the Romaji transcript, Okina Kokudokan, and gave my interpretation. And they said, well, there's a little liberty taken, but meaning is the same. Meaning is no different. In fact, if anything, it's more elegant. So that was it. But Nakasone-san, on the plane flying back to Tokyo, to Ueseki, Prime Minister, special aircraft, he admitted to the press, yes, I said that. But I said something like it, but he said it was misinterpreted. He put the blame on the interpreter. People do that. And we don't argue back every time. We're quite good sport about it. That's our clients. And that's the one definition, misquotation. Misquotation is something you wish you had not said. You said something, you quoted, and I wish I hadn't said that. I quote, that's a misquotation. The funny thing is, Mr. Nakasone kept saying it was misinterpreted for some time, and then the reality proved that when in fact it was the bastion, fortress, defending the West from the powerful Soviet military machinery. And Nakasone was in fact happy that he said that, and more recently, he forgot about all this, and he says, as I describe Japan as an aircraft carrier, unthinkable aircraft carrier, Chinkubo to watashi ga toru. He translated my English back into Japanese, and he's telling everyone this, as I said at that time. He doesn't pay me well. He doesn't owe me a cup of coffee. That's right. But it's funny. Politicians don't like that. But because of that trouble, and in the views of some people like Minister of Foreign Affairs, it was a storm in the teacup. Yeah. Storm in the tempest in the teacup. Tempest in the teacup that I created. If I was not that elegant, I could have avoided it.
That's why I thought it was interesting about when you have to use the pivot language in a multilingual conference, whereas from the Japanese to the English, the meaning changed slightly. And then you see that when it was retranslated back into Japanese, it changed considerably. So if it goes from, say, from Japanese to English to Polish, you wonder what nuances are changed.
That is right, yes. So you keep your fingers crossed that other interpreters, your teammates are good interpreters. And also with the pivot or relay interpreting, we are ever so careful in making statements clear and uncomplicated sentences. Sentences that non-native English speakers would understand without possible misunderstanding. I had to do this Japanese, English into Turkish, and Turkish into Russian twice last year in Istanbul, Izmir, and Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan. And there the working languages were Russian and Turkish. And there were no Japanese Turkish interpreters. And because I'm sort of an expert about Turkey, and I understand the way Turks speak English very well, I know their idiosyncrasies. So I was asked by KEDAN, Federation of Economic Organizations, and I took one of my interpreters with me. So, but I could tell that those Turks who were interpreting from Turkish into English, Turkish into Russian, and Russian into Turkish, and Turkish into that English, were not very good interpreters. They are not international grade. You see, Turkish is not still an international language. So these interpreters don't go to UN conference and other important conference. They have very limited experience. I could tell by the English they speak, rather primitive, crude English. They could not convey the subtle nuances. So I didn't rely on the nuance. I made my Japanese into English statement as simple as I can make it, for them to understand and put it into simple, clear Turkish and Russian. It was nerve-wracking again. Sometimes listen to the English interpretation. It didn't make sense at all. I was positive it wasn't anything similar to what was being said. And a few times I broke my own rule. I explained over the microphone to the Japanese business people. I apologize, but the statement does not make sense. I never did that. But they were members of the Japanese Joint Japan-Turkish Economic Mission. And we are like in the same mission. We're like comrades. They know me very well. I know most of them well. And they understood the circumstances. So I had to apologize that what I hear does not make sense. So please bear with me. At times I just had to cut out the whole sentence. Just be silent or harmonizing. 10, 20 seconds is harmonizing. Because normally if I can make any sense out of the statement, I will deliver something probably a little more generalized, more general statement, but something close to the original, rather than say, remaining silent. Remaining silent is the worst thing. If the interpreter does not understand something and shuts his mouth, that shakes up the confidence of the audience. The audience thinks, that interpreter is no good. And whatever other things they hear, and if they hear some interesting, strange thing, something they're not expected, they'll suspect that the interpreter is making a mistake. Loss of credibility is very bad. So the best thing is if you did not understand something, you keep saying something very general that it just cannot be completely mistaken. Harmless generality. To emphasize this, I can tell you rather jokingly. You can always say, if you lost 4 words, you don't know what this guy is talking about, you can say, well, I have been speaking at some length about this matter of faith in us, which is true, right? And then I certainly appreciate your point, and by that time, I begin understanding what he's trying to say. Then I begin producing something more meaningful and blend it into what I've been saying, and nobody knows that I've been doing. And that is doing service, not disservice. On the other hand, if I stop, people worry. What happened to my receiver? What is the interpreter? That is very unconstructive.
It happens on the news.
And the news all the time.
Get these long pauses where you know that the person's just has no idea what's happening.
Right, long pause. Yeah. I watch it and listen to it painfully because some interpreters I know because they are my students. Most probably never come to Simon, but maybe they may have come, but they may not have successfully graduated into real professional ranks. So if I accuse anybody by name, she may be my former student, so I don't criticize this. nowadays. There's a Japanese saying, try it in that way. That's an old senju or haiku. There's a thief. Somebody stole my apple. Catch the thief, turns out to be my own child. How embarrassing. That's the idea. I said, that was a bad interview. Turns out to be my former student. So, but in one way, I sympathize with them because none of them has real conference experience. They're not used to live exchange. They listen to the television and the tape record, video tape it, and transcribe it, look up the dictionaries, check with the experts, and write it out and read it most of the time. And for the real live thing, or like the Academy or Emmy or Tony Awards ceremony, that was bad. I don't specialize in entertainment world, but I know these things. I can do it. I will do it with more feeling. Very, very clumsy. Numbers. Yeah. They are big numbers. That's right. Well, in serious companies, they seldom will come because people always notice. People object. People say somebody will pick it up and say, they say, well, I'm afraid there's some mistranslation figures. They say, and when that is said, good interpreters would always interpret that as said, putting blame on yourself. You admit it. We make human errors. But most of the time, as I said, we work in a pair. The other interpreter quickly writes the figures. Because the one who is not interpreting can concentrate more on listening and writing. And the interpreter on the mic looks at those figures and visually verify what you have just heard and deliver them. People ask about difficulties in converting the units, like thousands and millions. Yes, they are difficult, but you can get used to it. And if you're used to discussing trade matters, you're always dealing in millions and billions. You don't talk about 1,912 dollars, no. And they're always round figures. If you make mistakes, you correct yourself. And you hope your body is ready.
Anything else you said, for example, the Japanese government, Japanese politician say something very impolite and you don't want to interpret it.
Yes. They say the darndest things. Yes. And I had to.
Even in that case, you don't change it.
Hard question. So, give you one example. A certain famous politician who is still very active. He's never become prime minister. He almost was finance minister. 12 years, 13 years. San Francisco, broad daylight, in the sort of high society luncheon meeting with ladies. And there was, in those days, some criticism that Japanese weren't buying enough foreign goods. Maybe Japanese don't like the foreign products. And he was making his counter argument emphatically and with his usual comical tone. He said, this is the way he spoke. 日本人が外国企業を買わないなんてそんなことありませんよ。私が聞くのはこれパーカーのペン、これネクタイはなんとかでベルトはなんとかで、日本人は外国企業。So I interpreted that. That was luncheon talk after lunch and consecutive interview. I said, it's not true that Japanese like foreign products. Like look at me, I have parka pen, my tie is Gucci, my belt is on, and he had in the same breath. Can you believe it? 日本人はバイオリンやジャンプね。だってセクシー。外国のものは何でも好きですよ。女は別ですよ。Can you believe it? He said it. Japanese men. In fact, he said Japanese, but he meant men. Sexist. Like everything forward. I'm not sure about women. Bad joke. Vulgar. Besides, not factual. Not factual. Japanese, being curious, always like to have experience. And when they go abroad, particularly Japanese men, it's well-known fact, they go with the JTB or other banners, and it's just not true. It's not funny. So, what did I do? Should I translate that? I policed that part. That was on rare occasions. I deliberately muffled it. I said something like, Japanese like almost everything foreign. I'm not sure about women, or something like. Meaning, for example, I'm not sure about Japanese women what they like. So the audience may have totally thought that the interpreter didn't put it right. It wasn't very good. So I put the blame on myself rather than making full of this Japanese politician. He didn't like me. Right after that, he understands some English. And before I would protest rather politely, it was his own secretary, government, with the secretary, minister. I don't think he should say. And he wasn't happy. He was not happy because that's why in the same day after the dinner, he repeated the same thing. And I policed that part. He resents me even today. About 5 years after that, one occasion, I was not in Germany. I tried to stay away from it. One occasion he saw me. Sort of chatting, we were chatting socially. 村松君、あまりわしのことちゃんと通訳しないからな。村松 this doesn't translate what I said. And he grinned. I didn't smile. To me, it was not funny. But that's the best protest. I try to stay away from him, and he doesn't ask me to interpret. And when he or his secretary called Simon, he sent an interpreter for his press conference. Carefully avoid having to interpret. There are other people, young people, like the excitement, like to them. But to me, he's vulgar, very vulgar. And if translated word for word, they full of himself and the nation to me, right?
Sometimes those people are intentionally vulgar, and they want to do that for a shock value.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
We have that a lot. I work for a steel company here. That happens occasionally. We spend a very high level of in the international business arena.
But to Westerners, too, occasionally intentionally use vulgar language.
Sure.
Yeah. Not in this kind of context, not about women or anything, but very strong vulgar language. And when that vulgarity or roughness is intended, I would convey that. But in this case, I don't think it meant to be. It was just his nature. So I feel that I'm justified in doctoring it a little bit.
It seems like it would be an area that would be very, not that particular example, but vulgar or rough language would be very difficult to translate because it, unless you're very, very familiar with the language.
Well, and also you have to be a master of your own language. Since I come from Tokyo, Saksa, I can talk like a sort of ruffian in the street if I mean to. And since I listen to Rakugo and I take great interest in various forms of our language, I can produce pretty good theatrical replica, equivalent. In fact, I enjoy it. I'm helping someone translate a new Huckleberry Finn's adventure, new version, and I'm trying to help him add colloquial, folksy touch to the Japanese version. It's not easy. It's not easy. Because if you use some of the dialect, nowadays, the days of political correctness, people object. Why use my dialect? Some people may object to using Kochi dialect. That you people are making fun of my province.
You have to choose somebody.
That's right, you have to choose somebody. That's it. But American politicians have used tough language. One U.S. Treasury, Secretary of Treasury, at the press conference at the American Embassy, and I was interviewing consecutively. He just had a meeting with the Japanese finance minister, and he was frustrated with lack of progress. And as he was speaking to the press, assembled Japanese, American, and others, his language became rougher and rougher. Asked about his meeting with his counterpart, he said, "Yes, I had conversation with Japanese finance minister, and in fact, that was no more than just a conversation. Getting sick and tired of having just conversations. I want action." This is how he said. And just as he said that, he pointed his finger at someone at the audience in general, and he had thick, graying mane, masculine, handsome old man, and he looked fearsome. "I want action." It was photographed and printed big front page of next day's newspaper, making it look like the famous recruitment poster. "Uncle Sam wants you." Remember that? Yeah, you know the poster? Very much part of the American culture. Fierce-looking man, that is wartime poster. "Government wants you, the young man, as a soldier. Uncle Sam wants you." But he has long eyebrow, like the present Prime Minister, wearing eyebrow. And he looks fearsome, and looks at me. "Uncle Sam," meaning the United States, "Uncle Sam wants you." He looks exactly like that. But it's gave very bad impression. Japanese government didn't like Japanese. People didn't like it. They all felt the Americans were unnecessarily hostile. Because you don't cause the loss of face of his counterpart in public like that. If he didn't like the conversation, he could have pressed him for more meaningful talk right there, but not next day to the press. That was just conversation. I'm sick and tired of conversation, especially when you are a guest in another country. Japanese politicians don't quite do that. Maybe they're too gentle. But again, it's a difficult case. When that is intended, he did intend to sound hostile. So in Japanese translation, I put it pretty strongly. And some people felt sorry about that, but nobody blamed me. Some innocent or rather stupid Japanese have made anti-Semitic comments without knowing the implications. Speaking to an American statesman of Jewish descent, talking about like the Jewish, what is that, the conspiracy to conquer the world. You know, one of those cheap books. I hesitated. I was saved by his colleague who cautioned me, "Don't you talk like this." So I was spared the embarrassment of having to either shh or something. I hope this American did not get the word. Like Yudaya. Some people said insensitive. I hope we are learning and getting a little better. More question. When I come back after Komatsu-san's 2 days, I'll come back with more anecdotes, but at the same time some visual or audio aids, and some more useful stories about note-taking. Note-taking is one area I'm very much interested in.
I'll be very interested in hearing about how you, some of your methods for training people.
Yes.
How you move someone from being just a fairly good speaker of English to being someone who can interpret.
Yes. I'll spend a good deal of time next time training this, because I spend more time training than interviewing myself. One, I have to pick ones with promising qualities, people with aptitudes. we interview all the people who apply for classes. After written tests, certain proficiency in English and Japanese, ability to listen to spoken statement and write down the summary, at least meaningful summary. But when it comes time for an interview, I can almost tell immediately if this person is not qualified when she starts talking like that. 私、通訳に興味があるんですけど、どうやったらなれるのか、you know, up talk. In English, there's an up talk too. But that is a very loose way of speech. Anyone who is so insensitive to one's own mother tongue should not be able to speak this. That's my view. And occasionally they show other qualities like expressiveness and fast speech, big vocabulary, solid grasp of the current affairs. We occasionally have that. It's very difficult to correct their bad speech habit. And I also expect a refined Japanese of the Japanese people. By that, I generally don't like ranki kotoba. Probably you young people speak without ra. Mireru instead of mirareru. Tabereru instead of taberareru. Is that how you say it? Tabereru. Tabereru. I'm a little old-fashioned. It's not grammatical one, and it's frowned upon by perfectionists, careful speakers, and I like to be a careful speaker. But I'm fighting losing battle when it comes to